Okay, so I think we've got a good group, so I'm just going to go ahead and kick off. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to everyone. Today's event is about remote working, and as the rapidly developing situation with COVID-19 required businesses to quickly mobilize their employees and to enable their employees to work from home due to their safety, we're now at a new opportunity and challenge for businesses. And that's, rather than simply maintaining that functionality, we want to really talk about the strategic approach that you can take to remote working to increase productivity, to support employee engagement, and to improve that remote employee experience. So today's discussions are focusing on the key technologies and capabilities that you can deploy in order to optimize your environment without compromising on security. My name is Jillian Neeson. I manage our briefing center in London for Citrix and now our virtual briefing program. And the goal of briefings is really to facilitate collaborative discussions with our customers, our amazing partners like Ultima, and our Citrix discussion technology leaders to enable our customers to drive business and transformation goals. So I'm really thrilled and delighted to be representing both Ultima and Citrix today as your host for this event. Citrix and Ultima have a long partnership, a long history of that strategic partnership, and I'm really pleased that we've been able to assemble a great team today from thought leaders from both Citrix and Ultima to lead to today's discussions. So just jumping in, let's go ahead and see the agenda. So as you can see, today's discussions are going to focus on first, Citrix vision and technology. We've got Adam Polsakowski, who's our head of UKI Financial Services and Enterprise Technical Pre-Sales, and he's going to give you an update on Citrix's vision and strategy. We'll then hand over to Russell Peters, who will give us a solutions demonstration and kind of bring that technology to life. We'll take a break. I know that these kind of long engagements staring at your screen can sometimes feel quite draining, so we're going to make sure that we can give you a chance to re-energize and come back for the second half of our programming, where you've got Andy McCulloch, the enterprise architect from Ultima, who's here to kind of talk more about those 10 lessons learned from mobile working and becoming the critical service. And then at the end, we'll wrap up with some question and answer. You've got a panel there where you can add in any questions that you have throughout the day. I will be monitoring that, and hopefully if we have time at the end, we'll be able to go ahead and address some of those questions. And at the very least, we'll make sure after the event to follow up for any questions that we're not able to address in today's agenda. So with that, I will go ahead and hand over to Adam Polsakowski, who will lead our session. As I was saying, Adam is our head of technical pre-sales for the financial services and enterprise in the UK. So he's got a long history of evangelizing with our customers and driving business solutions. So Adam, can I hand over to you?
You can indeed. Thank you very much, Julian. There we go. All being well, you should all see my slides now. He says all being well because it doesn't look like you can see my slides now. Gillian, can you just confirm if you can see my slides?
I cannot. For all of the testing, the slides went out the window as soon as we started the broadcast, didn't it?
It did indeed. Bear with me 1 second. I can fix this. I assure you it is definitely worth the wait. Please just bear with us 1 second. I reckon if I do that guy. How about now? No. There we go. How's that?
It's on presenter view.
On presenter view. I can also fix that one as well. How's that for technology failing us straight from the off? Excellent.
Looking good.
So I'm going to start with an apology. How's that for a webinar where we start with an apology? Apologies that we have yet again failed due to technical difficulties. Whoever actually comes up and fixes online collaboration tools so it just works is going to make themselves an awful lot of money. So thanks, Gillian. I am Adam Poskowski, as Gillian said. I do head up enterprise financial services and insurances pre-sales teams. That means I've got kind of 7 guys that work in my team, and our role and responsibility really is to be the interface between our customers and our technology to kind of understand what our customers are trying to achieve, and then look at how our solutions can help kind of deliver along those objectives and those requirements. Now, I'm mindful, I've kind of looked at a lot of the people that are connecting in on the call this morning. We've got quite a few existing Citrix customers on the call already. So what I thought might be useful is for us to almost reintroduce ourselves to you. Like, who is Citrix today? What is, we're 32 years old. We've been around for a long time. We've existed through every major technology evolution that's happened over the last 32 years. And many of those, we've been at the very forefront of those evolutions, whether it was through remote access, remote working, cloud orchestration, cloud networking, virtualization, mobility, content and collaboration. We've kind of been there or thereabouts as a leader in all of those things through the last 31, 32 years. I thought it might be useful for you to understand, like, who is Citrix today? How do we see ourselves? How do we see ourselves against the backdrop of everything that's happening at the moment? And then kind of how do we see that moving into the future? So I'm just going to start by kind of giving you kind of, how we work internally and what our beliefs are, because I think this represents the challenges that we see with our customers, and it helps you kind of see the direction of travel that we're going in. And I kind of, our first belief is we absolutely stand by, we believe that employee experience is a C-level priority, and it is a key competitive advantage. And I can kind of cover through why we think that is as we go through the content this morning. But the key part is, if we have people that are really comfortable working with the tools and technology that they need to be productive within their role, then fundamentally you have happier employees that will be more productive and provide more output. Our second belief is that digital workspace is actually a top enabler of that employee experience. Now, when you think about most organizations, never more so than today has this been true, but the engagement point between an employee and their employer is mostly through technology, even when we're in the office. There was a study that was done by an organization, and they calculated that the average person spends 6 hours a day staring at a screen. That's 6 hours of their working day, to confirm, just staring at a screen. I'd like to think some of them actually interact with the screen and do some work as well, but it shows that the key interaction point between an organization and its employees is actually through technology, is through a screen, is through the tools that we deliver to those people. So when we start to think about employee experience in many organizations, we've led, rightly so, with culture. And then the second thing is actually a lot of the focus has been on physical workplace. Let's feng shui the office, put in football tables, libraries, game boards, all of that kind of stuff. Actually, most employees' engagement is through technology, and that same level of investment hasn't necessarily been made. And arguably, and it's not an argument I'm going to mount now, or not strongly at least, we haven't actually innovated in technology for the best part of 20, 25 years. We've modernized, but the form of a laptop is broadly the same now as it was 20 years ago. Windows is broadly the same. The start button was invented in 95, and other than Windows 8, when Microsoft tried to remove it, it still exists. The operating model is broadly the same for employees, and it's seen a lack of innovation. And then just kind of, from us, we are absolutely investing, this is forefront of us to become the digital workspace leader. Now, many of you will know Citrix for virtualization of applications and desktops and for remote access. And that's a key part when we start to think about digital workspace, but that's only one component. And we're going to walk you through today what the other components are and how we're going on our journey to become a digital workspace leader. And then finally, just so you kind of get to know us internally, our internal focus is, we stand behind this in everything we do. We want to power a better way to work. We don't think that saying to employees that way that you work, that has pretty much been static for 30 years, is the right way to work, and we believe there is a better way. And we are actively making the investments, the engineering effort, and the consultation with our customers to make sure we really understand what that way should be, and then go and develop the products that our customers need. Now, against that backdrop, there's some challenges that we see across almost all of our customers that we speak to. There's nothing quite like a slide that makes no sense without context, right? But what I was trying to represent here is the frequency and the amplitude of disruptions that we now see in the workplace. We've got lots of people talking about BCP. We've got lots of people talking about business continuity, and they're strong, and they've never been more valid reasons to invoke a BCP scenario process than today. But what's been highlighted is disruption isn't new. Disruption happens across the board, and disruption will continue to happen. And the current pandemic scenario that we're in is absolutely a magnified example of disruption. Now, my challenge that I've always seen with when we think about disruption at an organizational level is we always fall back to disaster recovery and business continuity. Now, the challenge with those things is they're very much a macro level. If we look at most business continuity plans, it's built upon the assumption of a hole in the ground. We turn up and the office no longer exists, or there's a major geopolitical crisis, or there's some other reason that says we cannot work at a macro level. And that is, that's absolutely right. We have to work on those assumptions, and we have to have those plans. The problem is that the solutions that we put in place don't then often filter down to a micro level. But if we all think about our own personal scenarios, we all have micro level disruption. We all have things that stop us or make it difficult for us to get into the office. We all have things that make it difficult for us to work at times. And what we're looking at is how do we start to kind of bring these things together and say, actually, a continuity solution shouldn't just be about actually the whole business is down. It should be, well, how do we make sure that people can work whenever they need to work and keep uptime of our staff at the absolute highest, so that when someone has a plumbing issue and they can't come into work because they've got a flood, or there's childcare issues, or any of these things, how do we make sure that the tools and technology support them to carry on working as best they possibly can, and in many cases with no impact at all. So that's one of the areas of focus that we're working on at the moment. And just to kind of highlight that, this is some stats that I pulled together that shows kind of where we see traditional business continuity plan invocations. So this is, from natural disaster, extreme weather, we, all the way down to, you'll see the 3% at the bottom. I can tell you now that this is a graph that was pulled together at the back end of last year. So it doesn't actually have a pandemic, our current pandemic covered in there. Otherwise, I'm fairly sure we'd all agree that that should be at 100% right now. But it shows there's lots of different reasons that people will invoke BCP plans. But what it doesn't highlight is, how do we bring this down? What are the people level? What are the micro levels of continuity issues that we face that could have as big an organizational impact, depending on who those people are that are impacted by those disruptions? So the other thing that we see that we're working with our customers on that kind of bleeds into this challenge as well is this kind of notion that workloads are becoming more distributed. There is not a conversation that I don't get involved in where we don't talk about cloud. The first question that always comes up is, but Adam, what do you mean by cloud? I'm not going to go through what a definition of cloud is, because I think we'll all agree we can carve that one 20 different ways and we'll all have a slightly different view on what cloud is. But what we're saying here is workloads are moving out of the traditional security zone, and they're moving into locations that are owned and often managed by other people. So that could be a hyperscale cloud like Azure, like GCP, like AWS, or it could be a hosting scenario with someone like Workspace, or it could just be, almost an outsource of some service to one of our partners like Ultima. We see these workloads absolutely becoming more distributed, and that brings its own challenges. We talk about kind of the distribution model into cloud and the flexibility and agility that it brings, and that's absolutely true, and we can prove that out, and we have data points to prove that out. But it brings new challenges as well, especially when we start to think about backdropping that against this new world of disruption, where we're saying, well, actually, this model that we had before, where we will bring everyone kind of virtually, logically through our gateway into our data center, and then we'll go back out to our distributed workloads. That's now a really kind of legacy model. It's starting to show, its age and how frail it is, because now we have a fully distributed workforce. So we have to start kind of thinking about how do we line these things up. And then the additional problem that this all kind of brings together is just a continuation of the expansion of the attack surface. Every device is forms part of an attack surface. Every person, every piece of data, every new dispersed workload means that actually the attack surface area is expanding. And we've dealt with this typically using traditional security models, where we'll look at things like microsegmentation, where we'll look at identity as the gateway. There is an argument for many organizations that the path that they've taken now means the perimeter is your identity. As long as you can sign in, you'll get what you need. That's mostly flawed. We can talk a little about, and we will talk a little about, zero trust. Even zero trust is starting to feel a little old in some places, because zero trust is still about ingress control, so it's identity and assessment of ingress. We'll kind of explain, and Russ will show you in the demos, how we're starting to think about these things and how we move to more of a continual assessment of context and not just an ingress assessment of context. But there are kind of some opportunities that are coming out of that. Some are forced upon us. Some are opportunities for us to leverage. There's a saying that one of my Brazilian colleagues was explaining to me that they have in Brazil the other day, and he said, in Brazil, when we have major issues, the saying is, there's those that will cry and there's those that will make tissues. Nothing like a good pandemic to highlight, that as an example. We are now in a place where we have to start thinking about new work models. For many of us, that might just mean remote work and work from home models. But actually, there's new models where we can start to see new ways of employment models, where we've talked about the potential impact of the gig economy in enterprise and commercial customers for a long time, but that's always been an idea that's just been thought about, outside of your kind of traditional Uber, Deliveroo type gig economy workers. We've still been exploring what that might mean in different places. The NHS is now currently one of the largest gig economy employers in the UK. They went out to all retired nurses, clinical consultants, doctors, GPs, and said, actually, we need your skills back in. And they've taken that approach on a gig economy model. We've seen this happen in places where there's skills gaps, where in finance, we've seen lots of people that have kind of left the industry and fortunately retired early. But some of their skills are needed. So, gig economy type models are being used to bring some of those skills back in on a as needed basis. So there's some, as we now have a more flexible working model, it means that we can start, looking at how do we start to really think about the ways that we can impact the way that we go to business. The challenge is if we get this stuff wrong, which we often do in technology, and across just kind of broader organizational decisions, we can end up disengaging employees. So this was a stat that was taken from McKinsey, and McKinsey claimed that 85% of employees are actively disengaged at work. Now, I Googled what a disengaged employee is. I can tell you now there's about 18 different classifications of what a disengaged employee is, but broadly, the common theme across all of those is that it's somebody that doesn't bring their whole self into work. This is somebody that is just happy to come in, tick some boxes, wouldn't necessarily describe themselves as proud to work for their organization. They don't go above and beyond. They don't go the extra mile. These are people that will gladly take an offer at a different organization. That, for me, when I kind of read this stat and then I looked into what disengaged employee was, I found quite alarming, because that means that the lion's share of work, of productive work done in an organization, is done by a very small amount of employees. So it feels like there's an opportunity for us to think about how do we redress some of these things. Now, one of the challenges that sits behind that is actually technology is part of the problem for disengagement at work. Like I said before, lots of investment has been made into physical real estate, but not so much has been made in technology. And technology can bring people into the organization. They can take people on a journey, and it can change culture, right? We have to, as technologists, start thinking about this problem, because it's a huge cost to organizations. Now, this is a global stat. I don't quite know how much $7 trillion is. It's an unreasonable number of zeros. I wouldn't even know how to start writing it down, but I do know it's a lot of money, right? And we can argue how accurate that stat is, but I think we would all agree that we understand that lost productivity does equal a lot of wastage in all organizations. So we have to start thinking about where does this wastage come from? So I mentioned before, McKinsey had done the analysis to work out that 85% was actively disengaged. What McKinsey have also said is, while culture is the number one thing that has an impact on employee engagement and employee experience, number two is technology. So what our job is as a vendor working with people like Ultima, is to support our customers to say, right, how much do we think technology can really impact this wastage that you've got in your organization, and how can we help address and remove some of that wastage and strip that from your organization? Now, this is Citrix messaging that this is our vision. We've had this vision for a number of years, but when we start to think about this against the backdrop of what's going on in the world right now, it's even harder for people to remain productive while they're working from home. Many people are more disengaged because they're missing the people side of working in an office. There's many more distractions at home. So this is where we see actually our vision around the world of BCP, the world of employee engagement, and bringing these things together has never been more important than it is today. And it fundamentally means that from an individual person point of view, this is what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to drive up the number of productive, the amount of productive time that they have uninterrupted during the day. The average person, only has 1.2 hours of uninterrupted productive time. Now, not all interruptions are negative, right? There's the morale impact of water cooler conversations, coffee conversations. There's sometimes we need a distraction so that we can recalibrate our thoughts and those things. But there are many a time when we need to be able to sit down and get on. And many of the distractions we then face are digital distractions. Notifications coming on screen, email, Slack messages, WhatsApp, Teams notifications. It's this constant bombardment of people trying to time slice us when we're trying to be productive. So again, this is all of the kind of challenges that are in our minds at Citrix to think about, how do we address these things? And how do we really address these things now people have moved out of the physical boundaries of the office? Now that we have a completely, often a completely dispersed workforce where this problem is absolutely magnified. So to start introducing you to the Citrix solution to the problems that I've highlighted, we're going to talk about this, the concept of Workspace and the solution of Workspace from Citrix. Now, when you think about Workspace as a concept, it's the place that we work, right? It's where we go to get all of the things that we need our job. For many of us now, those things are digital. So at the forefront of us, when we think about a Citrix Workspace, we're thinking about how do we make it so that it's unified across all employees? How can we bring in all of the applications that people need to do their functional role, while at the same time, how do we start to leverage the value that we have within that workspace so that we can start to do some smart things with analytics, where we can start to analyze, usage information, we can analyze productivity, performance, security, and then use that so that we can, drive the requirements of the organization, the requirements of IT, the requirements of security, but, not, forgetting the employee as well. How do we use that information to drive, what the employee needs? So I'll come back and we'll talk about some of those things in a moment. But just give you a view of how we split this in Citrix, the three core areas that we think are really important when we start to think about the concept of Workspace. It is very much a workspace. It's that place that people go to get all of the tools that they need for their role. But it's more than just that. We have to start thinking about, well, how do we deliver these things? If we're going to move to a workspace world, which arguably is the delivery of services, right? Whether they're, SaaS services or just your own IT services, Workspace can be thought of as a service delivery portal. Well, if a service cannot run appropriately because it doesn't have the appropriate performance from a network level, then we potentially end up in some challenges. So networking is really important for us to think about. And I'm not talking about traditional layer 1 to 6 networking. I'm not talking about root switch. I'm not talking about how we do core networking in our data centers. I'm talking about how do we start thinking about application networking? How do we start thinking about security at an application level, performance at an application level, and then start to give the application all the things it needs at a network level? And I've already touched upon how we underpin all of that with analytics, and we'll see that into more detail in a moment. Now, I've kind of highlighted where we've been focused on it, but this is the feedback from a number of surveys that we've run with our customers, and this is what our customers are saying that they need us to focus on. And I think it's important for us to kind of just touch on this, because we've got over 400,000 customers. We have been around for 32 years. We do actively engage with our customers to say, to work out what is it that we can contribute. Where are your challenges? Where are your focuses? What do you need from Citrix? And resoundingly, it came down to these 3 buckets. We need to drive up experience across technology. There is a mass complication of technology, and for people in IT, for many of the people on this call, we will understand how most of these things work. But for the average person, just every time we add a new service, it changes the complexity. Then there's the attack surface area, so we kind of bring that into security and say, well, actually, how in this new world of everybody being dispersed, of all of our workloads now being outside of our traditional security zones, how do we start to wrap security? But then, be it commercially, be it technologically, or for any other reason, we need choice. We can't be forced down a route where we say, actually, this is something we have to commit to for the next 10 years because it is something that we've kind of backed ourselves into a corner. In a world of cloud, one of the we talk about agility and flexibility. That means we choice. So that's kind of where we focused our kind of internal thinking with the external view from our customers, and this is kind of where we came to. So I'm going to introduce you to Workspace from Citrix. I'm not going to go through this in too much detail because Russell's going to show you this in the demo, but I just want you to think about your traditional consumer experience that you would receive, whether that's from your social networking sites where you get your different news feeds, the pieces of the nuggets of information that are really relevant to you, whether it's through kind of a micro approach like that you might pull in through social networks or on your mobile device where you can kind of just pull in the things that the apps that are relevant to you. But then there's the kind of IT services as well, the applications, the desktops that people need. And I'm not just talking about kind of virtual applications and desktops, because that is what we are known for. That's often what people assume. But what we're looking at here is saying, well, actually, if over the next 5 years, according to Gartner, we're still going to be using 95% of the applications that we use today. That's important. We still have to deliver those. But Gartner also said that every customer is going to see a 400% increase in the number of SaaS applications that they're using. So we had to rethink, well, virtualization doesn't necessarily make sense for SaaS. It's not the most economical model. It's not the best user experience. So we started thinking, how do we bring SaaS in here while addressing all of the challenges that I've highlighted? And again, Russell's going to touch on that and show you kind of our solution there. But it means that as a user, I can come into this one portal, I can get those applications, and it will be delivered to me in the most contextual appropriate way. So it might be that SaaS uses my local browser in some context, but in other contexts where it's less secure, we might use some of our cloud technology and use an ephemeral browser. And then the last thing, and this is the big thing for us, kind of how do we add intelligence into this? How do we take modern tools like artificial intelligence, like machine learning, so that we can start scraping out all of the relevant bits of information and start to really drive a next level user experience? Now, one of the reasons that we've had to start thinking about AI and ML is this drive for data-driven decisions, for data-driven technology. We've spent a huge amount of investment in building out an analytics platform that sits behind our Workspace technology. Now, I just want you to kind of look at this, in the middle here, we've got Citrix Analytics in the middle. we have a collection of sensors on the left-hand side of that. You have a collection of sensors on the left-hand side of that. You have your users, your devices, content, apps, network. These all interact, right? This is where we would start to talk about, like, not the Internet of Things, but more the Internet of everything, right? Everything has the ability to pass pieces of information that are relevant. And when we start to aggregate those pieces of information and correlate them, we can start to really make some intelligent decisions. And that's what we started to do in our workspace. If we can start to correlate all of these, micro pieces of information, then we can start to think about, well, how do we use analytics from the different, outputs on the right-hand side there, security, performance, and productivity. As an example of that, if we focus on security, I think we all probably understand the notion of the impossible commute. I cannot be in London and then 30 minutes later be in Bangalore. So if we were to see 2 logons from the same user, we'd block that. That's not new. That's a conditional accessing that Microsoft have been doing with Azure AD for a period of time. There's lots of different ways that you can do that. What we're doing is kind of going, right, first of all, let's look at users and let's baseline what each user's normal activity looks like. Let's look at the things that Russell does every day, and let's form a behavioral analysis of Russell and understand what Russell's behavior is, and then we can start to look for those anomalies. So if Russell typically only opens the same 10 files every week, and then we see Russell try to access 20 files that he's never accessed before, it might just be that Russell's roles changed slightly. It might be that his boss has asked him to do something, or Russell's just trying to clean up some of his directories. But it might change our risk indicator score. So we might say, look, we're going to let Russell do some stuff, but we're going to just change the score a little bit. And when we change that score, we might actually redefine some policy that gets pushed back into those sensors that says, well, we'll allow Russell to access those 20 files and the 10 that he normally accesses. But beyond that, we're going to start restricting him and locking him down. If Russell then goes to try to browse to, I don't know, gmail.com, Dropbox, anywhere that we can exfiltrate data, right, piecing together those pieces of information, that now starts to look a bit more risky. It's more of an exfiltration attempt. So we would, again, feed some rules back in saying, actually, via our closed loop actions, stop Russell going to anything that is an exfil, somewhere where you can egress data. And it's kind of that continual cat and mouse. Russell plugs in the USB memory drive. We then say, actually remove all storage, block that. So we try and keep Russell working as much as we can, because we acknowledge user behavior does change, but typically only within certain confines. So we'll try and point them down a more secure route to keep them working, while changing the security posture in the background to secure the organization. So that's one example of security. Then you can start to see how that would play into things like performance. Let's understand what performance looks like for our employees. Let's baseline performance, and then we can start to look for deltas in performance. And again, we can start to say, well, actually, there's some challenges in performance right now to a certain group of users, to a certain user, to whoever. We can change some of the ways that we deliver things to increase performance, or we can flag it so we can say, hey, there's maybe a problem out on the internet. We need to start thinking about these things. And again, down to productivity. Now, from a productivity point of view, that will make a bit more sense where you start to see the demo and start to see Russell kind of interacting with the workspace. But what we do via our workspace is we insert ourselves, the Citrix workspace, between the user and their process. So we actually sit in the process line, which means we can understand the processes in your organization, and then we can start to take metrics along. How often does that process happen? How fast does that process happen? And then we can start to see how we can take some of those productivity metrics and bring them back into the organization. Say, actually, we think you can be more productive in these different places. We've saved you X time by doing this with these group of users. Why don't we roll that out across the board? In the interest of clarity, productivity is one of the newer functions that we've launched. There's some roadmaps on things I was talking about there are very much roadmap, but we do have that feature already today, and we are continuing to develop that in line with our vision there. And this is kind of really my last slide before Russell then kind of walks you through it. And this, for me, is one that, we don't talk about the business impact here. When we talk about a vision, we often, we focus on what's the business challenges, but there are some technology challenges as well. As we see so many organizations moving forward with a SaaS first model, that brings with it lots of benefits, whether it's the commercial benefit of being able to go down a consumption type model, a subscription model, or it could be that actually I just don't want to run it. I don't want to build stuff. I want to use stuff. So we get the benefits that come with that. When we start to think about those things in this kind of modern platform, they do bring their complexities. We see applications that are designed specifically for line of business. There's a certain HR application out there that is the love child of HR that everybody is buying right now, and it's very much sold to HR organizations, to HR teams, but every single person in the organization has to use it. In my experience of using that application, it is the worst user experience I've ever had, but our HR team loved it. And this is some of the problems that we start to face now. When it's so easy to buy applications, when it's so easy for a vendor to go and create a line of business sale where they can go to a chief HR officer and say, well, actually, why don't you buy this? Because this isn't really an IT thing, because you don't need infrastructure to run it. It's all our service. Then we've kind of disaggregated the trusted advisor role that IT would typically bring, where IT would say, what about the experience? What about security? What about all of those things? So every time we bring a new SaaS application or a new service into an organization, it actually might address some things, but it brings with it a new set of challenges. And that's why we believe having a workspace that sits over the top of all of these different services, that can simplify the user experience, that can provide one unified experience across all of the different device types, provide a consistent security model across all of those new applications, is really important. Now, with that, I think I probably talked too much. I'm about a minute over, so I'm going to throw it over to Russell now, and Russell's going to kind of show you the concepts and the things that we've been talking about, the solutions that we have, and how it might look for you. Over to you, Russ.
Hey, thanks, Adam. Thank you very much. I take it everyone can see and hear me okay. Okay, let me just show my screen. Give that a couple of minutes to kick in. Okay. I'm going to hide my webcam so I get my screen estate back and minimize my bar. Okay, so what we're going to do here, we're going to run through the workspace, how we're bringing all our different type of resources together, different access methods, accessing it from the client PC or Mac client that you're seeing here, web-based access, and obviously mobile as well, and how we're, like I say, bringing all those resources together, overlaying some security, high-level overview of the management side of things, running it in the cloud, networking, and as Adam was finishing on there, analytics, and then the intelligence baked into that workspace. So what you can see here is the workspace I have on my Windows PC. You can straight away see this activity news feed in the middle here, and we've got some actions, recent applications at the side here. And we'll come back to the activity feed, but I just wanted to just give an overview of what we're doing in this workspace. So on the left-hand side here, you can see we've got the home page that we're in here. We've got the actions. So these are some of the micro apps that we've built into the workspace. Depending on what your use case would be, you could build your own or use an off-the-shelf action to put into your workspace. Obviously, applications, Citrix has been delivering down virtual applications for many years. That's still the case here. But we're bringing different types of applications into here, right? So we've got web-based applications, virtual applications, SaaS-based applications. We can control how users are accessing these and overlay a level of security on there as well. Again, obviously virtual desktop, so be that hosted in the cloud, on premises, you can still deliver these out of into your workspace. And then from a collaboration standpoint, we've got our file access as well. So if you're using Office 365, we can inject OneDrive in there, different cloud storage we've got in there, your on-prem storage, network shares, whatever storage repositories that you're using, you can add the cloud connector and inject that into your files page in your portal, and then that mobilizes all of your data. It puts it in one location for your users to find, whether they access it, like I say, from a web client, a mobile client, or their PC. and they can gain access to all of those resources. Now you can brand this. We've got our company logo at the top there. Obviously, you'd put what's relevant to you in there. Because we're bringing lots of different types of resources together, we've got this search option at the top here. Like I say, this is going to search for your applications. It's going to search for your files. Like I say, if you've got lots of file repositories, that's a real time saver around searching for all those repositories. You don't have to go into different locations to find those different types of applications. And like I said, so just jumping into our applications here, right? So we're bringing different types in here. You can see we've got our SaaS-based applications. And one of the nice things about this is it's going to, all of those applications that are ejected into the workspace, it's going to enable your users to single sign into those applications. So that's really helpful for your users. As Adam was saying, we see lots of organizations moving towards SaaS-based application delivery. That can be quite complex for your users, especially when accessing from home. They've got, different web gateways, different username and passwords. If you put it into this workspace, you're taking care of the single sign-on process, deterring your users from writing a username and passwords or the same password to every account, which is obviously not ideal. To a certain extent, your users probably wouldn't even need to know their credentials to log into these SaaS-based applications. They would have one account to log into the workspace, and a single sign-on would take care of that logging into these applications. And what you can see here, when we've delivered this application down, we've overlaid some security on here, so you can see you've got a watermarking on there, an IP address of my client, and that's really a deterrent to stop people using their mobile device to screen capture that information, maybe share it with somebody else if it was sensitive. Same thing for like copy and paste. You're probably familiar with that. We can restrict the clipboard, we can restrict the print functionality. Like I say, if you're familiar with Citrix, you're probably familiar with us being able to do that for virtual apps and desktops for many years. That talks to that BCP scenario, right? So maybe you would allow this type of functionality in the office, like copy and paste, printing, but when you're accessing it remotely, you wouldn't want users to do that, save it onto their local device, that type of thing. And it just adds a level of security into the content that your users are accessing. Same thing from, I think Adam mentioned about the access control piece. You can put restrictions on known phishing links or bad websites. You don't want your users accessing inside your applications. You can see we clicked on that Pirate Bay link there, and obviously that's on a known bad website list, so that would be blocked inside of that application. And we don't necessarily need to secure every application. So if I look at the ServiceNow application that I've just clicked on there, again, single sign-on through to that application, but we just allow this application to open in its usual manner. This is how most web and SaaS-based applications would launch and to do that. And like I say, that's entirely up to you. If the application is contains sensitive information, you can put some restrictions on it. If it doesn't, you can just allow it to access a normal. You have one location for users to access it, and you've got the convenience of the single sign-on there. Then if we go to the micro app piece, we've got some really nice things in here. To Adam's point about the HR application. So again, to log into that, if you wanted to do a holiday request, you'd have to go into different gateway, different username and passwords. There's actually 2 different locations to find out what you've got left and actually do the request. So, what we can do, because the 80–90% of your workforce, all they want to do most of the time is log a holiday. You can maybe put a note in there and do that request.
Bear me 1 second. Hold on.
Yeah. Sorry, did you talk to me, Adam?
Sorry, Ross. It just cut out for a bit. Then I thought it was everyone else. I was just checking.
Okay. Yeah, no worries. Are we okay to continue?
Yep.
Okay. To Adam's point, right? So the HR application, yes, your HR team are going to be in there. They're power users. They're going to be in that application. Of course, you can still load that application and run it. But like the micro app piece that lots of your users are going to be doing, it's really nice for them, really convenient for them to be able to just do that one task. And this brings me to the news feed, right? So you can see lots of these notifications in here, and this is backed by intelligence. This is a bit like your social media news feed. This is specific to you. This is not a company-wide broadcast where you get inundated with messages. This would be messages based on what your roles are. So if I'm a manager of this user here and I had expense reports that I need approving, again, This would be something that you would get a link in an email, maybe. You click on that email, go off to another gateway, log in. I can quickly look at this thing here, what these expenses are, and I can run that approval and do that approval from here. Again, it's like context switching. I'm not switching in and out of what I'm doing to be able to do those tasks. You know, these are quite straightforward to deploy, these micro apps. If you're using some of the more well-known SaaS-based applications that you can see on the right-hand side here, ServiceNow, Salesforce, Workday, there's 100 or so micro apps already built into the service that you can pick from and utilize inside your workspace. If you're using your own in-house micro app, you can build your own in-house applications. As long as there's a REST API, you can build your own micro app to do that. I think you can see an example of that here where I actually built this one myself. I'm not a developer. This would not be a developer's task, just about a news feed. So I subscribe to Citrix's news feed. Every time there's a new release from Citrix press release, I can gain access to that. I can click on that and it will take me off into Citrix press release where I can read about that and just keep up to date on the statistics that are coming out around that. Same thing for here. This is quite topical. One of our domain specialists built this application. Again, this is not an off-the-shelf application. It's quite a nice demo scenario because this is around coronavirus, how it might not be relevant to your business, but this just shows the power of the micro apps, the things that you can build into that. So there's been an update on the statistics. I can pick the country of my choice. I can go off and view the details. I can view the updated details from the statistics of that. And I can even go off and then interact with another application, and I can send a text message or an email depending on what messaging service I want to use or to my users. And like I say, that's really powerful, right? So there's two APIs there, one going and pulling off that information, presenting it to notifying your user in the workspace, presenting that statistics for your users, then interacting it with another API to a messaging service to be able to broadcast to people in that region that there's an update on those statistics. So like I say, it's just a nice way of showing you how you can create these micro apps. If I jump back into it as well, you can see how we can interact with a different type of application. So if I had a problem with launching Salesforce, I want to submit that off rather than sitting on the call to my help desk or logging into Salesforce and doing that myself. You can see I've just built that micro app, I've logged that task, and I can go in there, I can launch that ServiceNow application, go into my incidents, and you can see just that micro app piece there. It's taking that incident I logged, would be in here, launching Salesforce. So it's taking care of the authentication through, logging this piece for me here. And your users don't need to worry about navigating Salesforce or knowing how to work this. They just need the micro app piece to go off and do that. So there's a couple of nice examples there of how we can build these micro apps, be that off the shelf with the bigger applications or in-house applications that we're using there as well. And this is the micro app on my Windows client, but the nice thing about the really powerful thing about the workspace is there'd be obviously web access here. You can see I've got a new notification. So this is going to look exactly the same to my users inside the web portal. And this is really nice if you've got users access from home, maybe they don't have a corporate device that's not enrolled, they don't have to install any agent, they can go to the web portal, and we can still overlay all of this security on here as well, protecting your users' applications and the copy and paste restrictions. All of those things can be honored in here as well. Same thing for mobile access. So if I jump into my mobile phone here, you can see that I've got a new notification in here, and I can do these expense reports. I can do all these approvals from here as well. So if I click on that expense report that I had in my on my mobile device, I can click on approve. That approval is still going to work from here as well. And then that's a really powerful thing about the workspace, is you're going to get this consistent user experience across every platform, making your users really productive on any device they've got. like I said before, expense reports, holiday approval, these types of things on a mobile device. It'd be a link in an email. You click on that link on a mobile device that's outside of your perimeter. It's probably not really going to work in there as well. Same thing for the micro apps, right? So if I look through my activities here, that holiday request that I did inside my office, I'm still going to be able to do that on my mobile device. Obviously, I've got all of my applications on there, and I can gain access to my files on here as well, because I have the files piece on here, and I can browse through there and navigate to all of my storage repositories. Like I said, whatever is in Citrix files will be available to me on this device here. Let me just minimize that for 1 second. One thing I just wanted to touch on as well, so I think it's quite topical. If I just jump back to my workspace, like I said, I think we know that lots of you are familiar with virtual apps and desktops, but one of the things I just wanted to touch on here is the Windows Virtual Desktop, because there's some nice things that we've built into there around optimization for accessing from home or accessing on a Windows Virtual Desktop. Let me minimize this 3D desktop. Give me 1 second. Okay, so we're logged in here, and one of the things you can see on here is I've got my Teams open on here, and like we've done for Skype for many years, we can optimize that for Citrix HDX. So we can now do that with Teams. We're a close relationship with Microsoft. We've built that into Teams, so your users are going to get a really nice experience. Also, we've got some content redirection going on here. So if I log into my browser, you can see I've got the Citrix content redirection in here, and that can be enabled or disabled for all websites or for websites based on the URL. And what I've done it for YouTube, right? So if you're going to go to YouTube, your users are browsing maybe news websites or content-rich websites. The nice thing about this is it will, by the way, this desktop's in the US, I'm accessing it from home. I'm not sure if anyone else is having problems with their service provider, but I seem to be having quite a few problems with my internet connection. So, like I say, based on the URL based or for all of your websites, you can redirect some of this, the fetching of this traffic on your local endpoint. So if I pick one of these sites here, what's this? If I just play one of these sites, you can see that that's going to play really nicely because that content is being fetched locally on my device. If I maybe pick a site from somewhere else because it's not on the URL list, you can see that content redirection's on there at the minute. And the Citrix policies, we can control a lot of the services that users are consuming, and you can control access to that as well. So, if you want to allow them printing, you can control these channels, map drives, scanners, all of those things with the policies built into Citrix. You can control how your users interact with this virtual desktop when they're at home accessing it as well. So I think that's worth mentioning in this home working scenario into our offering. So obviously lots of people a conference calling in a minute, moving to Teams. It's now fully optimized for HDX and Citrix. But one of the things that I mentioned, I think after we got cut off, was around the different types of resources we can access, right? So obviously Windows Virtual Desktop, lots of our customers are utilizing that with their Microsoft licensing, but it could be virtual apps and desktops in your data center, in the cloud of your choice. But also what we're seeing a lot of now to get people up and running to BCP is the remote PC. And ultimately what that is the PC in your office. If you can install the VDA on there, you can see it in Citrix infrastructure, and you can deliver that down like a HDX desktop delivery, like any other desktop, be that in a cloud, be that in your data center, be that PC under your desk. And like I say, that's becoming really a good use case to get people up and running very quickly in a BCP scenario. Ultimately, Citrix will be able to deliver down that type of desktop. And I think that moved me on quite nicely to the management console. I think that may be where we dropped off. And ultimately what this is the entry point, cloud hosted, but this is the entry point to the different services that you can that Citrix can deliver for you. And you can see some things here. We've got virtual apps and desktops, environment management, SD-WAN orchestrator. This is the micro app builder, endpoint management, analytics. All of these management pieces are now hosted in the cloud, delivered down to you as a service. You know, if you're familiar with virtual apps and desktops, you'll be familiar with the fact that you need to build and maintain some infrastructure service to deliver that down, be that license server, SQL server, delivery controllers, storefront servers. You know, all of those things need keeping the lights on, they need updating, securing, patching, licensing. Ultimately, for all of these services now, that goes away. We're delivering it down as a platform to you or as a service, and you know where your endpoint devices are, like I said before, virtual apps, Windows hosted desktop, or your remote PC, they can be in a resource location of your choice. So if we just take a look there, the different resource locations we can manage from in the cloud, you can see we've got some AWS, we've got some Azure, GCP, and obviously some on-prem there as well. Lots of different environments we can present into our workspace and deliver those down as a service. Even remote PC, having that under your desk. There's if we just look at here, there's a status page from Citrix. So you look at all of these services that we're delivering down, you can get a good understanding of the status of these. If there's some planned maintenance, you can get a heads up on when these will be carried out. The analytics tool, because we're delivering down lots of services, right? So to Adam's point around analytics, so we can see the endpoint, we can see the user coming in via their virtual apps and desktops they're using, their environment, their browsing. We can see lots of things around their users, like the access control piece, the gateways they're going to, and that feeds into the analytics service. So if we just jump to the security part of it, and this is ultimately user behavior analytics. So this is going to, pull metrics for your users, what times of day they're coming in, what locations they're coming in from, what applications they're using. And this is going to build a profile for your users. And most people are quite habitual. They do normal things or regular things, and it can build a profile for that user. And when that user starts doing things they don't normally do, their risk score will be raised, like you can see some of these users here. And you can autonomously action tasks on that, and you can log these events. So if we click on this user here, it's got a high risk score. One of the things that made their risk score to become high was doing excessive file downloads, right? So from a security standpoint, maybe the user had access to this location, and they were permission to access these files, but they were downloading a lot high volume than they would normally do. So one of the tasks we have in our toolkit is to kick off session recording. So like I say, not stopping the user from working, but maybe you could record that event if you thought that was the right thing to do. And like I say, that would be kicked off autonomously, so there's no alerting, someone logging in, look what's going on, and after the events happen, this would do this in real time. First time access from a new location, again, outside of a user's normal behavior, but maybe it is a valid log on, and then you could maybe even notify the user as it's you, add them to the watch list, notify their admin. You could block them, you could restrict their access. Like I say, the rules is controlled by you. The analytics is going to happen in real time, and over time it's become more and more accurate. If this user went to New York once a year for a conference, or that would be in their profile, right? It would understand that that's how that user works, and it wouldn't bother that user anymore. So over time the profile will become really accurate, but the rules how you want to engage it, that's configurable by you. So you can control how restrictive or what you want to do with that. Same thing for performance. So again, this is going to identify when your users are having a bad experience, and you can list it by all sites. You can see the number of users that are logged in, this amount with excellent experience, some with poor, some with 12. You can look at it on a per site basis, or if you just jump back to all sites there, and then we can click on these users that have got a poor user experience. We can go into here and we can look at the users. This user's got session availability issues. You can drill into there, find out what might be causing these, maybe machine failure, client connection error. A classic one that everyone always wanted to find information on around session login duration. And then if your users are having poor performance on that, you can have a look. Maybe it's root policy, profile load time, brokering the connection, you can drill into there and get a really good identity of what may be causing it. Session responsiveness is again something that a lot of people want to find information on. It could be your data center latency, be going across the WAN, or your host delay, those type of things. So really powerful metrics available inside the security and performance analytics. I just want to touch on as well regarding the SD-WAN and the visibility. We can get into that around statistics. Great if you're a global organization, but you don't have to be global. This can just be based on a sort of site-to-site connectivity. So if you have the SD-WAN going between one of your sites, I can just pick one there, and then you can get some great visibility into that site, whether the connectivity is good, and ultimately what SD-WAN is, right? So it can aggregate different types of connections for you. Maybe you've got MPLS, internet, some satellite if it's a really remote branch office, and then you can drill into here and you can get information around latency. So this would be the virtual channel, and this would be broken down into the different links you've got connected. We've got an LTE there and an internet connectivity there. So that's a really nice way of getting visibility of the services you are actually receiving from your service provider, and having a look how it affects your users. And if we look at this, the overall availability, again, you've got the virtual channel here, you've got the internet connectivity and the LTE one there. So like I say, great way to troubleshoot connectivity links per site if you're going for SD-WAN. Also as well, for your users, you're finding that a big overhead on that network, you can drill into here and you can look at the top applications. If you're finding applications that are non-business applications are going over that traffic, maybe internet traffic, news websites, maybe Facebook, Instagram, whatever it is, you can then get great visibility of that, change your firewall policies or change the priority of those channels. And obviously this being a Citrix device, we can obviously put a priority on those different types of Citrix traffic here. If I just jump back to all sites for 1 second and look into configuration, we can put some quality service on here for Citrix, and we can start prioritizing that HCS traffic on there as well. So like I say, really nice tools inside the cloud around management, analytics, SD-WAN for connectivity, and it makes hosting a lot easier, management a lot easier. Obviously, this is cloud hosted. Guys, I think that was pretty much all I was going to cover off. Apologies for dropping off before. I'm hoping I didn't miss anything out. But yeah, I think we'll probably wrap it there, and I'll hand back to Gillian because I think I'm just about on time. So thank you, everyone. I'm hoping that was useful, and thanks very much for your time.
Brilliant. Thanks, Russ. Yes, it's been great to kind of hear an update from Adam this morning on Citrix innovations, and then to see that kind of come to life from you in the demo has been really, really helpful. So thank you so much. We're now going to hand it over to Andy McCulloch. Andy McCulloch is the solutions architect in the Modern Workspace team at Ultima, and he's specialized in Citrix solutions, but also is kind of his remit and is responsible for anything really that involves delivering services to our users. And he has 15 years of experience designing and deploying Citrix solutions, 12 of those years at Ultima. So he is incredibly well placed to kind of share with us what we're seeing in our customers and considerations for how you can develop a remote working strategy. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Andy.
Thanks very much, Gillian. If you could hand over the screen to me. Thank you very much. Right, are you able to see that okay?
Yeah, looking great.
Perfect, thanks very much. So thanks everyone for sticking with us. I'm acutely aware I'm the person stood between you and lunch, so hopefully we'll be able to keep this on time so everyone can make use of their Just Eat vouchers. So what I want to talk today about is probably a little bit less product focused, and just look at, based on our experiences in the last couple of months, what lessons have we been able to learn? So this is, if my slides will work with me. So what we're going to talk about is experiences from the last couple of months. So this is kind of both internally within Ultima and also from working with customers who have been facing some of the very real challenges that recent events have posed for us. trying to highlight some things that we can consider going forward. So now potentially people are having to accommodate new use cases, new working scenarios, things that we should really be thinking about to make sure that we're well positioned to be able to handle those, and how we can start to transition from a kind of primarily tactical response to the current scenario to being more strategic and proactive in terms of how we can actually handle these new use cases. So what I've done is I've tried to break these down into kind of individual lessons. So we'll kind of work through on that structure, and I would encourage anyone, if anyone has any questions as we go through, there is a question box in GoToWebinar that you should be able to drop any questions in, and we'll look to go through those when I've finished going through the content, and hopefully answer any questions. And if there's anything we can't tackle online, then we'll be able to kind of address those offline, but we'll go through those when we wrap up. So I think one of the key factors of the last couple of months is that it's really been a challenge for a lot of organizations. I think a lot of different businesses would have different understandings of the level of preparedness. Some people would be kind of really confident that they've got kind of robust DR strategies in place, and kind of they've got multiple data centers, services are highly available. This has really been kind of a business continuity challenge rather than a service availability challenge, which not everyone's been in the same level of preparedness for. So there have been a lot of businesses that have been put in a position where they've had to respond really quickly to some of the challenges that have come up in the last couple of months. And what we're seeing within Ultima is that there's kind of two waves of change that are occurring within business. We've seen the first wave, which is where people are quickly having to address the remote working challenges. So at the point when the government tells everyone to go home, some organizations will be in a position where they can kind of easily accommodate that. So there are kind of maybe more mature remote working strategies in place. But then a lot of organizations may have treated it as kind of a tactical use case, or kind of a subset of their organization may have been remote working capable. But then when the other majority of the business then has to go and work from home, there wasn't necessarily a solution in place for those. So what we've seen was kind of the immediate requirement of being able to enable that remote working for users, which has been a largely tactical and reactive response. What we're starting to see come through now is more of a second wave, where people are looking at the reality of the current situation and seeing that this may not necessarily be a short-term change that we need to introduce, where there may be some more ongoing requirements to be able to accommodate these new ways of working. So in order to accommodate that, people are starting to have to think more strategically about how they use their solutions and how they deliver services to users. So we've seen some great examples from Russell's demos of how Citrix can enable those types of workings and how we can give a great user experience. And obviously Adam's talk earlier on today kind of went through the general Citrix vision in terms of how we can present a consistent set of services and a great user experience to users. So these are the types of things that organizations are starting to look at and see how they can use those to fulfill the needs of the users as these new use cases evolve. So the first lesson is really sometimes things just need to get done. Typically, when we work with customers, there's typically a project methodology which we'd have to go through, which would involve an element of like planning, design, testing, UAT. So these types of engagements they don't tend to be quick. Like even in kind of smallish deployments, you're typically talking of a couple of weeks in terms of going through just the kind of foundational stages. For large enterprise deployments, you're talking kind of months. In some deployments we've been involved in, even years of effort to kind of deliver a finely tuned enterprise grade solution. I think one of the things that kind of we as an organization and our customers have learned as part of the COVID-19 outbreak is that sometimes there is just a requirement to get things done. So one of the things we've tried to emphasize is that going through a plan, deploy, iterate cycle can be really beneficial in terms of being able to deliver capabilities to users in a really time efficient manner. And we can do that by focusing on key use cases and requirements. So one of the main challenges that business we're faced with is how do we keep the lights on? So the very fundamental business requirement is how do we continue with the ability to operate our business when we can't work the way we're used to working. So identifying those key use cases and requirements to understand what is the minimum viable product that we can deliver, which enables us to continue our way of working. Secondary to that, we can look at what's most important to the user. So what are the key capabilities that they need to be able to do their job? What are the most important applications that we need to be able to deliver, and being able to prioritize those and make sure that you're delivering the essential services helps you accelerate that delivery of a solution. Now, as you're going through that process, one of the things is there may be compromises you have to make along the way. Obviously, in terms of making sure that you're delivering the essential may mean that you need to make some sacrifices in terms of being able to deliver the kind of optional benefits that solution may be able to deliver. But one of the important things is if you're going to make compromises, you really need to track them and make sure that you don't lose sight of what the end goal is in terms of being able to deliver a complete solution to your users. So one of the things that Ultima have done as part of our response to this is delivering our autonomous business continuity proposition. So part of this is a remote working offering. So this is based off a Citrix solution, the Citrix stack. So basically using Citrix Cloud to be able to deliver remote working capabilities for an organization with no remote working capabilities in place already in as little as 2 days. So that was something that we were able to put together through the benefit of Citrix Cloud being able to consume a lot of the infrastructure needs as a service, but also looking at kind of really isolating what the key solution components are that would allow a business to keep the lights on and keep working in kind of an unprecedented scenario. So those are the kind of things that we've been looking at as an organization, and in terms of how we can enable organizations to gain the benefits of these types of technologies quickly, with speed being of the essence. So the second lesson learned is around security. So security is really a spectrum. So at one end, we've got kind of use in the playground. They can do whatever they want. And at the other end, we've got everything's locked down. The users can't do anything. So what we typically find is that the actual place where we should be is kind of in the middle of that. And this goes back to what Russell was showing around kind of behavior analytics, where we really need to be able to be adaptive and contextual with security, because if users can't do what they need to do, they will find a way to do what they need to do. And if they start circumventing security controls that you're putting in place, then that's not a great position to be in. So things to consider when you're looking at security is where does the actual data sit? So security for the sake of security doesn't really add a lot of value. You need to ensure that you're applying security in the right places. So data tends to be what organizations need to protect. So if data's on the endpoint, then obviously that means that you need to have far more security controls in place on the endpoint to ensure that data maintains secure for obvious compliance reasons. If your data can remain in the data center and users don't actually transfer that data to their endpoints, then it means that you can apply far more central security controls to that data, which tends to provide, firstly, an easier approach to applying security policies, but secondly, it means that you don't necessarily have to impact the user experience on the endpoint to the same degree. So leveraging solutions like virtual apps and desktops and kind of the Citrix policies to enable a separation between the actual data and the endpoint gives you far greater flexibility when you're trying to enable users in a remote working scenario. So the user behavior analytics also gives you kind of far more contextual policy controls, because you're able to respond to changes. So rather than having to restrict access by default, you may be able to respond to particular events that mean that you may want to increase the level of security that you're applying. So that's a fantastic example of how you can start to look at a more contextual security approach for users rather than having to go the full gung-ho approach in terms of restricting everything that the user's going to do. One of the really important things that we've been working with a lot of customers on is MFA. MFA, all the things, everything. If you don't have multi-factor authentication, you absolutely must. If you don't have it at the moment, look at Azure AD, MFA. So Microsoft made some licensing changes around that recently. That means that effectively, if you have Azure AD, then you can provide multi-factor authentication to your users. So if it's something that you don't have at the moment, absolutely 100% have a look at it. It's kind of beyond critical to make sure that Adam mentioned earlier, kind of identity being kind of security perimeter. There's some nuances to that, but you absolutely want to make sure that when users are kind of working remotely, that you have a high level of confidence that users are who they say they are when they're accessing your systems. And again, context is key. Don't put up barriers that you expect to be knocked down. So if you're putting in security controls that are going to stop your users from doing what they need to do to be productive, they will find ways around them. They absolutely 100% of the time, they will find ways around them. And you don't want to be blocking users from doing things that they need to do to be able to do their job, which is why context is absolutely key whenever you're looking at any type of security for a user workspace solution. So lesson 3 is around culture. So I primarily included this slide because it has a picture of two people that are close to each other, and I fondly remember days when we could be close to other people. But culture is really important. So personally, I've worked remotely for the majority of my time at Ultima. I think one of the really important things that we've learned as an organization is how to function better as a team in a distributed manner. So personally, I've never been more engaged with my colleagues, with my company, than I have been in the last 2 months. We have regular all-hands company updates. We have weekly team meetings. We have virtual coffee sessions where kind of we'll all get on a Teams call and kind of just have a chat about kind of how things are going. So culture is really important kind of from a personal perspective and also from a business perspective, because collaboration and productivity do really go hand in hand. People don't tend to be able to work autonomously. They generally need to interact with other people to be able to achieve optimal output. So making sure that you have the collaboration tools in place to be able to enable that type of working is absolutely essential. So we've seen huge increases in the use of collaboration tools across organizations. So some numbers from Microsoft. So Teams usage has gone absolutely huge. So November 2019, they had 20 million daily users. By March, so after COVID-19, that had doubled. And between March and April, that had gone up to 75 million daily active users. So there was a day in March where they had 200 million individual meeting participants, and on that same day, there were 4.1 billion meeting minutes in a single day. Now, that is a staggering increase in usage of kind of Microsoft's collaboration tools. And there's other tools that are extremely common. So Skype for Business, again, another fantastic collaboration tool, being able to interact with your colleagues and collaborate on work. And Zoom, also another one that we see quite frequently, perhaps not necessarily so much business focused, but also kind of personal collaboration. Zoom's kind of grown exponentially in the last couple of months. Now, as we're seeing the huge increase of collaboration tools, we have to expect they're going to creep into the business environment. So Teams most certainly, Skype for Business most certainly, and even Zoom to a degree, we're starting to see far more in corporate workspaces, kind of whether it be for personal or professional collaboration. Optimization for these is absolutely key to make sure that these tools are usable and give a great user experience. So we're in a fantastic position in that kind of through Citrix innovations, we're able to deliver optimization for all of the 3 collaboration tools that we've mentioned. So Teams optimization, so that's been available since December last year. Skype for Business optimization, that's been kind of available for many years, and Citrix has got a fantastic track record in delivering Skype for Business solutions in an optimized manner. I think one of the things that people are maybe less aware of is that there is actually a Zoom optimization pack available, so you can obtain that directly from Zoom. So I'll include a link for that in the deck that goes out after this. But really, if you're using these in your environment, you absolutely must optimize them to make sure that you're giving the best user experience for these. So a side effect of that is Teams. Teams, another thing to be aware of is that the usage is going to be huge in a lot of organizations. Now, Teams software does have the side effect of being a bit of a beast. So it does tend to be quite heavy in terms of resources. So a customer environment I was looking at quite recently, they had a session-based desktop they were delivering to users, and every Teams instance on kind of a number of session hosts were all sat on 6 gig of RAM per application. That's a crazy amount of resources for an application. So it's really important to make sure that you're paying attention to the amount of resources these tools are using on your environment and making sure that you're optimizing that as much as possible. So things like Workspace Environment Manager will be able to kind of help in terms of optimizing that memory usage for things like Teams, where they may be using a little bit more resource than perhaps you've typically seen in your environments. And another thing, again, on a personal level, not everyone adapts to remote working in the same way. I think it's important to understand that people will have different needs. People's personality types can lead to different challenges. Some people kind of work quite well in isolation. Other people kind of might need a bit more of a virtual hug in some scenarios. So it's really important to make sure that if you are kind of leading a team of people, or even if you kind of know some colleagues that might be a little bit more isolated than others, just kind of take a moment to make sure that you're interacting with these people and you're making sure that they're kind of set up and able to kind of get on with things, kind of both from a personal level and a professional level. So Russell was a fantastic example for this. So what happens when the internet becomes the bottleneck? So there's a lot of challenges. So everyone's kind of started to kind of go from home. This puts more pressure on ISPs. So luckily ISPs have been pretty uniform in saying that actually that they don't really have any capacity constraints. Any kind of challenges tend to be more local. So there still can be some variability in connection performance for users when they're working at home. So their experience can be a bit more variable. Their network experience can be a lot more variable when they're kind of outside of the corporate environment than it would be when they're sat in a kind of office with a fantastic managed network environment internally with kind of high capacity business grade internet circuits. These people are now kind of at home on a kind of commercial kind of off-the-shelf ISP connection, so they're not necessarily in the same position as they would be in the office. So being able to deliver an adaptive workspace environment based on the user's network scenario gives users a far better user experience. I think also looking at it from the infrastructure side, there can be challenges when people, again, are outside of the office in terms of how are they actually accessing these services. So for larger organizations, if you might be covering multiple geos, is there anything that you can do around resource placement? So is this a good time to start looking at, can we perhaps position some services in kind of like cloud regions? So one of the fantastic things that cloud service providers have given us is the fact that there is such broad geographic coverage that we can start to tactically position services in places that might be nearby our user base. So this becomes far more pertinent when our user base then becomes far more dispersed. So it's not necessarily a user is sat in an office and there's a server room kind of in the same office building where they access their services from. When they're outside of the office, then there's less affinity between the users and the services. So looking at the placement of those is kind of critical at times like this to make sure that you're delivering services from the best location. Being able to deliver services from multiple DCs. So this is another constraint that we've seen with a few customers where perhaps they may have limitations in terms of the amount of external connectivity that can go into a data center. So people traditionally may have been accessing services over a kind of high bandwidth MPLS, but they may have a fairly limited internet connection. So when you start to pivot those connections from being accessed over the MPLS to over the internet, then you can start to introduce some capacity constraints in that respect. So some customers are looking at being able to distribute connections across multiple entry points. So if you have multiple data centers, using services like global server load balancing from Citrix ADC can give you the ability to flexibly distribute connections between multiple locations to make sure that you're using the resources that you have. Potentially looking at switching from kind of active-passive to active-active topologies can again kind of increase your overall capacity. And one of the kind of things that we've seen quite a lot is where people are kind of like looking at, well, do we deliver VPN-based connectivity or do we look at virtual apps and desktops type connectivity? So one of the kind of broader statements that we'd kind of make is that if you have a constrained network environment, then you're typically going to get a much better user experience delivering applications via virtual apps and desktops than you will do via a VPN. So again, in terms of how you're kind of providing users with access, there may be some tactical decisions that you've made right now, but then strategically there may be better options for them going forwards. For critical users, so there's some new very small SD-WAN appliances that Citrix have introduced. So in terms of kind of key users, so kind of like CXO level, if there are any users that have absolute criticality in terms of their internet connection, being able to provide multiple ISP connections for them and be able to aggregate those to provide high availability or increased bandwidth with these small SD-WAN appliances integrating into a broader SD-WAN solution can give you kind of far better resiliency in terms of your user connections. So there's some kind of really interesting options there that we've been exploring with some customers. So lesson 5 is getting big fast. So this has been kind of a real challenge for a lot of organizations where they may have had some more tactical use cases in terms of remote access. So this is pretty common that a lot of organizations that may be existing Citrix customers or they may be using other services, they may only provide those remote working capabilities to like 10, 20, 30% of their staff based on their role. When the other 70% of the users have to go home, if you're delivering a virtual desktop-based solution or if you're delivering a session-based desktop solution, there needs to be some capacity to actually run that environment. And one of the real challenges that we've seen with a lot of customers is if you need to scale your environments by 2x or 3x, how can you do that if all of a sudden buying servers is really hard? So obviously, a lot of organizations are in the same position, and that then puts demands on supply chain in terms of being able to obtain these servers. So if you then have a 6-week lead time on being able to buy some new tin to add to your environment to increase that capacity, 6 weeks is an eternity when it's business critical services. One of the solutions people have looked at is being able to burst capacity to the cloud. So that really provides a really fast way of being able to scale up your environment with little upfront investment. So there are some organizations where they may be using cloud services as a DR type environment, so being able to transition into a cloud hosting environment in the event there was a production outage. Some of these customers start to use that in terms of being able to deliver more production services from those types of environments. So there may be some compromises that you need to make there. So obviously, if you're delivering if you're delivering your user workspace from a cloud environment, but your application backend and your data remains in an on-prem data center. There can be some network challenges around that, but this is where things like Citrix SD-WAN can kind of optimize those connections between those environments and make sure that you're giving kind of an optimal user experience. But like we said in lesson 1, sometimes in order to kind of meet the business requirements, there are some compromises that need to be made. So this is potentially one of those that some customers would consider. An important point is don't give it away for free. So if you've got a finite amount of resources, then you really want to make sure you're getting best bang for buck. So you want to make sure that you're not over-speccing your resources, you're not giving away too many virtual CPUs, you're not allocating people too much memory. So things like Citrix Performance Analytics are fantastic at kind of measuring user experience. Tools like ControlUp will give you a great overview in terms of right-sizing your virtual environment, so giving recommendations in terms of potentially oversized resources, anything which may be undersized, so making sure that you're basically delivering the right amount of resources for the users rather than kind of over-committing unnecessarily. Just making sure that you've got a good handle on exactly what it is that you're using in your environment and making sure that you're getting best value out of that is absolutely essential when you need to scale up really quickly. Another important point is don't forget the management infrastructure. So if you're delivering kind of Citrix services from on-prem, don't forget that there are service limitations in terms of how many users, how many VDAs that your delivery infrastructure is going to accommodate. So a fantastic way to alleviate that is by looking at the Citrix Cloud offerings. So for example, recent developments mean that the virtual apps and desktop service for a single instance has recently been scaled up, so it will support up to 25,000 concurrent users per Citrix Cloud tenant, which is fantastic. So for a lot of organizations that potentially wouldn't come near that, for kind of other organizations, if you happen to be over 25,000 seats, fantastic. There are obviously plans to kind of increase those limits to be able to accommodate even larger deployments in a single instance, but there are deployment topologies that we can use which can account even over 25,000 concurrent users. So it's not necessarily a solution limitation, it's just a case of for a single tenant, we can scale up to 25,000 seats, which obviously would require a significant amount of on-prem infrastructure to deliver. So just make sure that you're monitoring your management infrastructure as well. So if you had a significant increase in users, just make sure you're monitoring your storefront, your delivery controllers, your SQL, just to make sure that you're not hitting any performance limitations that you wouldn't have seen in a BAU scenario. And that's the important thing, is that we may, as the usage of environments increases, find bottlenecks that otherwise would have been complete non-issues. So it's just something to kind of keep an eye on as you go forwards. So lesson number 6 is use what you already have. So I think a lot of customers don't necessarily fully use the tools that they have available. So one of the massive upticks that we've seen in terms of deployment types is remote PC. So Russell mentioned this in his demo. This is basically utilizing the desktop PCs that you have in your office to provide users with a virtual desktop style experience. So rather than having to deliver virtualized desktops or session-based desktops, you can use the tin that you've already bought that is sat on a user's desk in the office. You can put a Citrix agent on that and users can access that using your Citrix remote access mechanisms. So this can either be through your on-premises deployment, or this could be through Citrix Cloud. So this is the fundamental of what our remote working autonomous business continuity proposal is around, is leveraging the existing hardware that you've already invested in, which may be sat on a desktop in an office that people can't get to, and enabling that so users can access that remotely. So in that's a really low-hanging fruit approach in terms of it provides access to exactly the same services that a user would be able to access if they were sat in the office. So in terms of application functionality, in terms of network access, it already works. So just provisioning access to an existing desktop PC in a high performance and optimized manner can solve a lot of problems. Another thing to consider is if you've got ADC appliances. So a lot of people will have ADCs or NetScalers that they have deployed to support a Citrix deployment. A thing to bear in mind with these is that depending on the edition that you have, there are a number of built-in licenses, the smart access or universal licenses. Those universal licenses entitle you to provide VPN access to licensed users, and also gives you some additional capabilities. So if you had a tactical need to provide VPN-based services, it's just important to understand that potentially there is a built-in capacity for providing that service in your existing ADC appliances. So a number of customers have looked to utilize these as a secondary access mechanism where perhaps they needed to give users direct network access to certain services, and they are able to do this using the built-in licensing. So if you have standard edition license on your ADCs, then you have 500 built-in licenses for users. If you've got advanced edition, then that's 1,000 licenses. And if you've got premium edition ADCs, then you have unlimited user license built in. But important thing to consider is capacity. So if you're starting to introduce VPN users, it's important to understand the capacity constraints on the appliances that you have deployed. So just consider the amount of network throughput and the additional load that you're going to be putting on your appliances before you kind of do wholesale VPN deployments. So the Citrix gateway capability on the ADCs also support IDP proxy. So again, a tactical approach perhaps, but being able to provide users with the ability to RDP to internal services via the Citrix gateway function, that could provide another option for users to be able to access internal services. So another thing is just in terms of being able to extend your environment. So Citrix have introduced some business continuity assurance programs to provide businesses who have existing Citrix licenses the option of buying some additional short-term capacity in terms of Citrix licensing. So if you have an existing solution that you need to add users to, there are programs in place to be able to enable you to do this in a cost-efficient manner at the moment. So it's fantastic that that's available to help customers out at the moment. So we touched on scaling into cloud services. So I just wanted to throw in a bit of a word of caution just in terms of some of the limitations that we can have there. So cloud providers can be the single point of failure too in some scenarios. So I think one of the things we've seen with Azure in recent times is that cloud capacity is big, but it's not infinite. It can run out. So Microsoft in a recent analysts call said that the use of Azure services in some regions has increased 770%. That's 770%. That is massive. Now, one of the byproducts we've seen from that is that it's been fairly challenging at times to be able to spin up new instances in Azure in some regions. So where there are constraints, Microsoft have been providing priority access to critical services. So obviously to NHS and government and kind of all the ones that kind of altruistically you'd kind of hope they would prioritize over perhaps kind of me spinning up a couple of test Windows 10 desktops. But nonetheless, it can be a challenge. So if you've said, well, hey, our business continuity plan is that we're going to scale up and deploy 5,000 Windows 10 desktops in Azure, if you go to pull the trigger on that and Microsoft says, sorry, no, we haven't got capacity, then that's potentially quite a big problem. So the reason why that can be a bit of a problem is businesses tend to align with a single cloud provider at the moment. So most organizations would tend to have their favorite. So it may be Azure, it may be AWS. In some probably more increasing cases, it could be GCP. But having just the one cloud provider that you're completely aligned to, again, can present a single point of failure. So if that provider has capacity issues in your chosen regions, or if there are any service impacting outages, then if you're tied to that cloud provider and that's the only cloud provider you're positioned to use, then it's important to consider what happens if there is a failure which impacts just that cloud provider. So one of the things, I mean, I've been an advocate of this for kind of many years, but I think that it's important that businesses consider the adoption of like a multi-cloud delivery model. So this may be either tactically for individual services, or it could be kind of just a broader model or approach that businesses adopt for how they consume cloud services. So there are various capabilities that Citrix provide which kind of ease the use of multi-cloud. So for virtual apps and desktops, we're able to deploy workloads into all the main cloud providers. So Azure, AWS, GCP, all of those are enabled by default for cloud-based deployments through Citrix Cloud. So being able to tactically deploy workloads into those is kind of enabled out of the box. Important considerations for that is just how you're providing connectivity in those scenarios. So this is where the Citrix networking technologies start to really pay dividends. So in terms of SD-WAN, to be able to provide the intra-cloud connectivity and the QoS and the service level guarantees that you'd need for being able to deliver enterprise grade networking solutions in those types of environments, whilst providing kind of a uniform overlay that you can easily manage. And again, in terms of ADC, in terms of being able to provide entry points into these types of environments, ADC and kind of one of the things that's been quite popular in recent times as customers move to the cloud is pooled licensing, to be able to dynamically move capacity between potentially different cloud providers or between on-prem and cloud as necessary. So giving you the flexibility to be able to position your workloads in the optimum place rather than the place they just happen to have been put at that point in time. Having that flexibility is a fantastic capability that I think going forwards we're going to start seeing a lot more of people deploying across multiple different cloud providers and on-prem. So being able to link all those together in a seamless manner is going to be a real strength that that will help support future growth and future usage. Endpoints are kind of frequently overlooked, but obviously it's great providing all these services, but users need to access them from something. It'd be wonderful if they didn't. Unfortunately, we don't have brain implants yet to be able to enable us to access these kind of touchless workspaces, but obviously in the future, maybe one day. But if you're sending users home in mass, if they're not laptop users, then there's a challenge around how you'd potentially get a corporate device to users. So being able to enable them can potentially mean having to get hold of some hardware to actually hand to a user. So we're quite lucky within Ultima in that most of our users are kind of like laptop based anyway, because we're typically out and about, but there are obviously some users who may be more enabled than others. And one of the challenges we found is that firstly, as soon as this all went down, there was a real challenge obtaining laptops from anywhere. So kind of as people are trying to scrabble around and kind of find where can I get like 500-600 laptops kind of tomorrow, all of a sudden you start coming into supply chain issues. They're just you're hitting lead times on things, and when you want things right now, that can be a real problem. Even down to things like, so we talked about collaboration, things like headsets for people. If they don't have them, you have to get them to them, which again can be a logistical challenge when there are constraints on delivery services, that people can't really come into the office to collect them. There's some real challenges around how you actually get endpoint solutions to users quickly. So one of the common things is in companies where maybe they didn't have a BYOD policy, they started to enable users to use personal devices to be able to access these systems. Depending on the access mechanism, it can bring into frame questions about how they're managed and what the security postures are. But like we said initially, sometimes there are compromises that need to be made. Again, they should be tracked as compromisers, and it's not necessarily the end state that you want the solution to be in, but enabling users' personal devices for access to corporate services is something that is entirely possible, given the right security framework. Using virtual apps and desktops obviously simplifies the use of BYOD purely because you're not actually exposing the data to the endpoint. So if you have a virtual apps and desktop service that users can access, then enabling users' personal devices to be able to access these systems is actually really straightforward. Now, recent developments kind of mean that we can add some additional controls around that. So, for example, there's additional app protection policies which can be leveraged, which provides an additional layer of protection for kind of BYOD devices. So it'll provide protection against things like keyloggers and users taking screenshots of kind of potentially sensitive data. So there's some nice capabilities around that, but it's just really important to kind of understand in these types of events kind of what happens to your endpoint strategy. So is all of a sudden a company that may not have had a BYOD policy, have you just adopted one through necessity? So it's important to understand that that's potentially something that needs to be more formally addressed in terms of understanding what controls you need to make sure that you can appropriately secure that type of access to your environment. So lesson 9, and we're getting to the end, so don't worry, it'll be lunch soon. So lesson 9 is use the time wisely. So we're now in a position where we've kind of got over potentially the initial peak. We've handled that initial response to the challenges we've been faced. So it's a fantastic time to start planning for wave 2 now. So there's more and more organizations coming out day by day. So granted, some of these are kind of like technology companies, but I think, for example, Twitter have come out yesterday or kind of last night and basically said that they're going to be opening their offices soon, but they're going to leave it up to employees as to whether or not they choose to work from home or if they want to work in the office, and that's as a permanent change to their working style. And there's a lot of organizations where they're looking at this as a real opportunity. So this is kind of where the mindset shift comes in that there may be some organizations where working from home would be virtually a swear word. They couldn't understand the possibility that people could work productively if they weren't physically sat in an office. And I think one of the benefits of the current scenario is that I think a lot of organizations have understood that actually people can be productive using kind of the new technology capabilities that businesses have today. And actually, it's raising the question of, do we need to bring people back into the offices? Do we need to be spending kind of multiple £1 million on kind of central London real estate? So I know some financial services organisations are certainly looking at it as an opportunity for decentralising their workforce and kind of reducing the amount of real estate they need to maintain, just provide somewhere for somebody to put their laptop on a desk. So it's a really good opportunity to make sure that you're getting your strategy in place now and really understanding what the requirements are going to be going forwards. So it's a good opportunity to have a look at your current state and kind of highlight any areas for improvement as well. So we'll obviously have kind of felt some pain throughout kind of the rapid growth period, and while we're trying to rapidly adopt new use cases and provide new working styles for users. So it's a good opportunity to kind of have a look at those pain points and just understand how you're going to address them going forwards, and making sure that you're putting in place the right plans to accommodate for the direction the business wants to go in. And I think another important thing is for a lot of businesses, so like I said before, remote working kind of traditionally has been kind of a tactical offering. So for a lot of organizations, this is now an absolutely business critical service. This is in fact what is keeping the business going. So it's a good opportunity to make sure that does your infrastructure posture support that? So whereas you might have been able to make certain resiliency compromises when it was a tactical use case, and if remote working is not available, it's not the end of the world. People just do what they were going to do anyway when they're in the office. Now this is business critical. Just make sure that your infrastructure actually reflects that. And investing in pain points, making sure that where you've perhaps felt some short-term pain, making sure that you've addressed any resource or capacity constraints that you may have in your environment, and then you have a approach to being able to deal with those should an increase be necessary in future. So again, I think we're starting to come to terms with the fact that the current scenario is not likely to be a particularly short-term scenario. So making sure that we're potentially able to respond to other peaks in a cohesive manner is kind of pretty appropriate at this time. I've underlined it and put it in bold. Invest in user experience. So like I said, there are lots of different ways that you can give people remote access. You can give people VPN, you can kind of throw in some RDP. There are lots of ways that you can just get things done. But it's a really great opportunity, especially if this is going to become a more strategic offering, to really invest in user experience and make sure that you're giving users the best tools and the best capabilities to be able to do their job from a place of their choosing. Obviously, if you need assistance with any strategic planning or any kind of assessment functions, then that's certainly somewhere that Ultima can provide some assistance. So the last lesson is don't forget to close the door behind you. So obviously we've gone through a period of fairly significant change for a lot of businesses. So I've highlighted a couple of points that I made in lesson 1 that I just want to go over. One of the main points is that if you've done things quickly, or you've gone in with a minimum viable product, or you've made some compromises along the way, just make sure that you do remember that they were compromises and they weren't necessarily the final landing point for the solution. So don't forget to iterate. So make sure you're looking at what the current needs are and making sure that you're addressing them in due course. Because what was good enough may not be good enough when this becomes the new normal. And making sure that you pay back any technical debt on compromises. So if you've made any compromises on the way, so like we said in a BYOD scenario, it may have been a necessary compromise for the purpose of getting people working initially, but just make sure that you're revisiting those and you're addressing any of the compromises you've made as you go through the next few months, and making sure that you put in place a robust service improvement methodology. So again, this is just looking at making sure that you are getting the most out of the tools that you have. There are a lot of capabilities in the Citrix tool set that can help you deliver a fantastic user experience and the ability to get work done anywhere. And making sure that you're actually leveraging those to the maximum extent, making sure that you're taking the opportunity to say, well, actually, so we've seen massive Teams growth, but we don't happen to be on a version that supports Teams optimization. Now's a good time to start planning those types of activities, making sure that you're leveraging the capabilities of the solutions that you have to make sure that you're going to deliver that great user experience to users. So I'll wrap up with a few takeaways. So just a few points I wanted to call out. Just make sure that you're understanding new business requirements. What the business wanted before is not necessarily what they want now. Driven by the fact that the way people work may permanently change. So we don't know how things are going to return or if they're going to return to normal. So the assumption that people are going to be office-based may not necessarily be true going forward. So there's, I think we can all probably agree there are likely to be some long-term changes that will be seen in the way that people work for the foreseeable future. If your service is now critical, make sure your architecture says that. So if this is now a business critical service, just make sure that you're aware of kind of any single points of failure in your environment, making sure you've got optimum resiliency in place to make sure that you have the high service availability that your business would expect. Use the tools that you've got available. So again, people, in my experience, can chronically underuse the capabilities that the Citrix toolset provides. So use these to be the team that says yes. So when people want to use Zoom in their virtual desktop, be the team that says yes, we've got an optimization pack for that. People want to use Teams, again, Teams growth is massive. Like, use the optimization tools to be able to deliver what the business wants, what the users want. learn from any pain points that were experienced. So it's a fantastic opportunity. Now things have started to calm down slightly, to be able to look and assess at the challenges that were faced as we went into this crisis, and start to put things in place to make sure that they're perhaps less painful should we re-encounter these types of scenarios. And make sure you use the opportunity. So if this is now a business critical service, make sure you're investing in the platform to enable your users. So we've touched on some of the technology capabilities that we have through Citrix Analytics, but make sure that security and user experience are not mutually exclusive. So use the tools you have available to deliver an exceptional user experience for your employees while they're working at home. So that wraps us up. So I don't know if we've had any questions come in, but if anyone does have any questions they'd like to ask, again, there is a questions box in the GoToWebinar control panel. Feel free to submit any, if either questions for me or any of the Citrix team who have kindly presented today. One of the things we did just want to mention is if you do have any more detailed questions, or if you've got any specific scenarios that you wanted to go into, off the back of this, one of the things that we're going to be following up with you after the webinar is we're going to be doing some Ask an Architect sessions. So this is going to be where you're going to be able to book a one-on-one slot with one of our architects, Ultima, possibly me, possibly one of my colleagues. So if you do have anything that you wanted to kind of dive into that is specific to you, or if you've got any pain points that you've experienced, or kind of things that you just want to sanity check, we're going to be offering you the ability to just book a one-on-one session so we can kind of go through any specifics you may have. So and hopefully kind of help you on your Citrix journey and your travel into the future way of working. So I think we'll hold there for a minute and just see if any questions come in, but I think that was it from me. So thank you very much everyone for bearing with us. Hopefully you've held out and like you're all ready for lunch, and hopefully that's been interesting and useful.
Yeah, that's been brilliant, Andy. Thank you so much for that. I mean, I thought it was so powerful not only to see this morning's content where we learn more about those innovations and the demo, but now to kind of have these key considerations as we move forward and as we kind of are able to then make a strategic plan for our remote workforces. So I really appreciated that. I think it was very informative. I've not really seen anything come through. We do have some questions, but I think everyone's really just said thanks so much. It was great. So it's good to see that. And just to let you know, the Ultimate team will be sending around the recording of this as well as the slides, and then the detailed information about how you can book an Ask an Architect session. So thank you, everyone. I don't know about you, but I'm excited to use my Just Eat voucher. Thank you so much, Ultima. So take care, everyone. And yeah, we'll be in touch with the follow-ups.